Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of the Game Art Institute, where we train artists for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing game artists to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right. Thank you guys for joining me. I know we've got a couple of people in here live with us, and some people will be listening to this later on. So just a couple of quick notes. If we're referring to the screen, then just make sure you're checking out the video version of this over at gameartinstitute.com. And if you're here live, then you're looking at the screen. So it's all positive. We're going to have an awesome conversation and walk through character stuff, very specifically character. My guest here today is a character artist at MPC. And then we will open this up for questions. But for those of you who are here live, just ask questions and I'll feed all of that stuff through as it goes. So Hesham, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. And do you mind putting your art station up just so people know exactly
Yeah, sure.
how to find you?
It doesn't have like pretty much, sorry, this is the magazine. I don't know the magazine. So, yeah, so you can find it like here,
Cool.
Hesham Abouhatab.artstation.com.
All right, great. So
Yeah.
tell me, you're a character artist at MPC. There's a couple of other friends of mine that work there or have worked there. What does that do? What does a character artist do at MPC? Because I know it's not film or game, or it's kind of like it does a bunch of stuff. Am I wrong?
No, actually, MPC, it divides into two sections.
Yeah.
Film, like
Yep.
only film. That's where I work.
Okay.
There is MPC advertising. This is something different. It's a
Right.
different building, different people, different management, different everything, different project as well. So at film, basically what we do is we do all the high poly blockbuster, like the blockbuster characters and creatures for film.
Mm-hmm.
Starting from concepting sometimes. I don't say it's like 100% concepting. It's like 50% concepting sometimes, and the other times you do concept development. So you don't do concepting from scratch,
Yeah.
as sometimes, most of the times actually, you get like concepts from client side. Um, and you have to translate that concept into 3D. You either get 2D concepts or 3D concepts. So a film, you only do modeling. If you're a character artist at NPC Film, especially, and you're a character artist, you only specialize in characters. So you only do character like organic modeling. You don't do props. You don't do like customs and stuff like that. Because there's like other modelers that do that stuff for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you only concentrate on the organic thing, that like the organic part of it. Unless you're doing a digital, so you do the customs for it, but not the weapons, for example, not um, the hard stuff, like the hard surface modeling. You don't do
Are,
hard surface.
are you doing clothing, or are you literally just doing bodies and faces?
I just do bodies and faces at the moment. So
Does
like,
somebody else do hair?
yes. So it's character artists are character modelers. So you do modeling and facial modeling as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Some people,
Topology.
um, yeah, like sometimes you do topology, sometimes it's sent to another studio, but it's like you don't do, like we don't usually do topology at MPC, or
Mm-hmm.
basically a senior artist doesn't do topology. It's more of a job for the like more of a junior artist level or mid artist level.
And hopefully robots eventually and machine learning. So we don't
Uh,
ever have to touch that stuff.
yeah, you don't have to, you don't ever touch like machineries, or robots or stuff like that, you don't do it. Like there
Cool.
is hard surface. So there is character modelers or
Yeah.
organic modelers, and there is hard surface modelers, and there is environment modelers, and there are like groomers.
Okay.
Okay, and texture artists, of course, like texture
Yeah.
artists, look dev artists, and groomers. A grooming, like a modeling artist, can do texturing, but cannot do look dev or grooming.
Oh, okay. Interesting. The material work is the look dev work, right? The shaders and things like that.
No, modelers do not do shaders. I
Okay,
mean,
but
it's like,
what's look dev is what I was wondering.
yeah, look dev is shading and basically shading and rendering,
Got
not
it.
like rendering the final image, but it's like look development of the character, the
Got it.
materials and the feel skin, metal, the shading of the hair, the shading of
Yeah.
everything, basically, even for the hard surface, for everything, for environments, for everything. So look dev artists, they do shading and material work for all aspects,
Uh-huh.
but a character modeler only does modeling
Okay.
for organic modeling.
Now, how do you get that job? And I'm looking at your art station, and there's like 4 posts.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
so you give us no history of how you and where you came from. You're just like, I'm awesome. So how do you get that job? What do you have to do these days?
Well, it was a bit harder for me than many of like the other people right now because
Mhm.
when I started like 10 years ago, but not as a character artist or not as a 3D artist. I
Mhm.
started as an interior designer when
Oh,
I graduated from the college.
yeah.
And in Egypt, nobody knew 3D. Like nobody knew how to do characters or creatures or stuff like that. It wasn't a common knowledge, and it wasn't used in cinemas in Egypt. So there was no industry. It was super limited, and the resources were really limited. So I had to learn by myself 5 years ago. And then I started like to switch to character art from just doing like interior and archivists in 3D Max. Um, I started learning ZBrush and Mudbox and how to do characters and all that stuff just from like free YouTube videos and just practicing. That's why I don't publish more a lot because I don't like to publish stuff that looks bad. So I like to practice more at home. Like so I have like so many, like you'll find here, this is the only project I think published. I mean, everything I have here is pretty much a work in progress, which I learn from, but I never publish now, at least.
Hmm.
But yeah, but after that, I worked in one of the biggest visual effects companies in Egypt. They were doing visual effects for film and TV and commercials. Uh, it's called Mercury Visual Effects. And I worked there for 2.5 years, for 2 years. And basically, I was the only character modeler on spot, and I had to do all the character work from modeling topology, concepting, sculpting, hair, rendering, lighting, look dev, everything, like basically everything, even close simulations, sometimes effects, dynamics, and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
sometimes shot sculpting. Um, and it ranged from animals to realistic to stylized. So it was quite a lot of knowledge in 2 years. So I made a nice portfolio, like a nice, not a portfolio, a showreel. It was nice at the time. It was like it's like 5 years old, Shoria.
Hmm.
So that's how I got the job here because I had all aspects included in the Shoria, like from modeling different stuff from monsters to animals, and with the texturing, with the shading, with the rendering. So I had the knowledge. It showed that I had the knowledge of more than one aspect.
Hmm.
And at the time, MPC were working on Lion King. I didn't work on Lion King, but they were recruiting people that knows how to sculpt animals, and
Mm.
they had lots of creature and animal work at the time. So yeah, so I just got hired because of my story. It had like lots of things that is film related. And it was pretty hard, to be honest, for somebody from Egypt to get recognized outside, like abroad, and land a job like this and have an opportunity to work in like huge movies.
Yeah.
Like the recent movies I worked on was like Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Aquaman, X-Men, The Dark Phoenix, um, lots of things, Pokemon, Detective Pikachu,
Mm, I love
Underwater
that.
is going to be released soon. So yeah, so basically to land a job like this, you have to build a strong portfolio, but
Yeah.
also you have to know what are you looking for and to know what is the requirements of the market at the time being. Like
Mm,
to give you an example, for like now, everybody is looking for facial modelers.
mm. Okay.
Like everybody, like all the companies, they're all searching for facial modelers. So if you can do some like include in your portfolio something like if you didn't work in the industry in like face shapes or stuff like that, so sculpt something with facial expressions, for example. Um, Sculpt portraits. Like you can do only one good portrait, and you will land a job. But if you can do only like one really good piece,
Mm.
like anatomically correct, it looks nice, it looks good, like the structure looks solid, uh, the anatomy looks solid, and yeah, you can land a job like that. I believe that you can land a job like that with only one good piece.
Well, let's unpack that then. I think there's a lot of stuff there, but I think that's something worth us diving into because what we need to understand, what I think is hard to understand, is what does it, oops, excuse me, what does it mean one good piece, right? Like what are the triggers that tell somebody that this is a good piece, you know? Because of course we could look at Vimal, we could look at Hossein, and you know I love those guys. Um, you know, but just looking at that, that can be intimidating, and we don't know what's, you know, and
Yeah,
sometimes people only look at their finished work. They don't look at some of Hussein's earlier work, you know, and or they don't look
yeah,
at some of Vimal's, like, you know, the first couple of hours maybe aren't as pretty as the rest, so they
yeah,
skip
of
that,
course.
you know.
Yeah,
So what are the triggers? Like, how does somebody, what do they focus on? And I got one more thing to add to that, because if I look at this, the thing that's on your screen right now, the ZBrush sculpt,
yeah,
and then I look at your art station with the texture and all of that, I've
it's
found that
completely
it's,
different.
yeah, I found that it's
Yeah,
hard for people to make that gap. And I've also found that people get stuck in ZBrush when really the thing that they need to do is get out of ZBrush and get into some of these other programs.
exactly, because ZBrush also gives you like a false representation of the model,
Hmm. Yeah.
because it doesn't have like an accurate camera and stuff like that. So while working, you need to have both ZBrush and Maya opened,
Yeah.
and you do like some tweaks and then send it to Maya and check if it looks correct or not. Um, apply the textures, and check, because when you do something in ZBrush and it looks, oh wow, it looks awesome, and then you
I know.
send it to Maya and wow, this is not good. This is a completely different thing.
I have to interrupt you. I have to, I tell my students this all the time. That ZBrush is designed to look good. Like Ofer,
Exactly.
we would talk about this, right? Because people would have these problems, and you know they'd be like, oh, it always looks so good in ZBrush,
Yeah.
and Ofer would be like, because I wrote it to look good in ZBrush. You know, that's what I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, exactly. And some people also stick with the orthographic view,
Mm-hmm.
which you can see it looks dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stick to the orthographic view, yeah, it's good to sculpt with the orthographic view, but always switch to the perspective just to check how everything works for
Yeah.
you. How the forms work, how the forms work, how the the dimensions work, and like the measurements. work.
Mm.
So it can be tricky, like in ZBrush alone, because it's completely different from how it would look like in Maya. So what I do usually is I open Maya and ZBrush, both, and
Hmm.
just do some tweaks. And yeah, this looks good in ZBrush. Let's send it to Maya and check if something, because when you send it in Maya, you see some errors.
Right.
Like you will see some errors, and you'll have to fix that. You'll, oh, the eyes looks like too wide, or it looks uh, like compared to the texture, like you might do something like this, and you say you think that the iris might look good in that position, and when you send it to Maya and you apply the texture and render, and oops, the iris look bad, and like the eyelids are too far from the edge of the iris, and it just doesn't look good. Like the expression doesn't look good in the end, and the look doesn't look good. So I would never stick with ZBrush for too long. I will send it to Maya pretty soon in the process,
Hmm.
especially when I'm doing like topology work for it. So I will send it to Maya pretty soon, check if everything looks good, check with the different cameras, and I always use uh, a high range camera like 110 or like 85 or something, because 50 will look more like fish eye or something super close. It will just make the portrait look bad.
Hmm.
So I will stick with like high numbers in the focal length.
Hmm.
Yeah, and just work with like two applications with ZBrush and with Maya side by side. And
No.
sometimes I do adjustments in Maya actually with like the
Oh.
sculptor, or like move vertices in Maya to that I feel it will look good like that. And then if it's a dramatic change, I will send it back to ZBrush and just project the details that I have there. But if it's not, it will not affect the displacement map that you're gonna export.
Got it. How far do you take anatomy? Like, if you could just, how far do we have to take the anatomy from your perspective?
So far. Yeah.
All the way.
I mean, not all the way, but it's super crucial to have like a strong base to in the beginning, because if you anybody can model like a body, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or a face. But and you can see like lots of portraits online and lots of bodies online. Yeah, it looks good, but if you concentrate a bit, it's the base is not there. There is something, but sometimes there's not the base is not there. And no matter how you try to improve it, it will never improve because the base anatomy is not there. So I think that's why some people struggle at the beginning,
Hmm.
because they are too eager to get a final look super fast, but
Yeah.
they didn't study anatomy really well to get to that point. So I see people like I see some people like post stuff, and they're like, oh, I did that character or that like portrait in like 3 hours. So, okay. But when you really look at it, it doesn't look good. But he thinks it looks good, and this is a disaster, because if you think your work looks good, you will never improve. So you have to think, you have to feel that your work is like, yeah, this is okay, this is fine. I'm gonna like publish that, but you had spent like lots of time doing it, like on that work, not just 2 or 3 hours, and you're like, ah, this looks okay, this looks good, this is amazing, I'm like the best artist in the world, and just publish it, and it doesn't look good in the end, because you forgot the bases, you forgot the anatomy basis, you forgot to add more stuff, especially for beginners. I'm not talking about like professionals, because they know what they're doing. If you do it a lot, you can do it like really fast in 2 hours and get like a really good result. But I mean, like for beginners and like people who just got into sculpting and like character art, I think they rush too fast to a point, and they forget to start slow, and they like their work too much that they can't improve. And I've seen some people work like in 3 years it didn't improve any, like, and this is a disaster because they think it's like the best. And if you, in my opinion, if you like your work so much, you will never improve in it. But if you think that's, oh, this is nothing, and I have to do more, I have to do better, you will always improve. So that's
but it gets depressing after a while.
sometimes, yeah, it gets depressing, but if you take it slowly,
Mm,
like if you take it like really slowly and just do like a piece, don't publish it and don't show it to anybody. Just do a piece, but just make your hand work. Because when you see something, you get like your eye memory, but your hand is not trained. Like you think that you can do it, but your hand is not trained to it.
hmm
So if you, yeah, if you do some work, if you do more work at home, just don't publish it. Like don't worry about like social networking and like getting exposure just yet. Just practice a lot, and you will get to it. And if it gets depressing, uh, just I mean, for me, when it gets depressing to me, I just look at other people's work and see and say like, okay, he could do it, then I can do it. So I try to do what is he doing. So
hmm
I just try to put like a goal in front of me. I want to be there, and I will be there. Yes, it gets depressing, and yes, it gets boring sometimes. And if you get bored of a piece that you're working on, just leave it and start a new one. Just leave it. It doesn't matter. I mean, you will always do something better. The next piece that you will work on, it will always be better than the past one. So just leave it and just start a new one with a fresh mind, with like a really fresh eye. Just search the internet, get some references. Just say, okay, I'll try to do that. If it didn't work, I'll do something else, maybe something easier. Start with something easy and then go harder and harder and harder until you, yeah, I think that's it with like depression from work, because I got depressed like many times in the beginning. Uh, Even like lately, I got depressed as well. But you just need to keep going. If you love what you're doing, you will just keep going.
I like that note to just keep your hand, kind of busy. So
Yeah,
how
exactly.
do you think like I don't know how to exactly phrase this, but what I'm wondering is like, how you think about anatomy, and and if you could describe like what anatomy is from your perspective. And again, I'm not entirely sure what
Yeah,
I'm asking here, but I'm trying to get a sense of like of how you conceptualize it. Like, is it lines? Because when I'm looking here at the face that we're seeing here inside of ZBrush, it's like
yeah,
there's all these halftones. I can see all these lines, but you're not going down into wrinkles, but you haven't just done
yeah,
planes either. This is much more advanced than planes, but it's not a bunch of tertiary
yeah,
details. So how do you think about anatomy in terms of the face that
yeah. I'll
helps
show.
you get to a certain level and not farther?
Yeah, sure. I'll show you another piece now.
Yeah,
So this guy, this
yeah.
is actually a work in progress now. Like I'm still working on that, and this one now will be published soon. So it started like something like this.
Got it.
So I think of anatomy as volumes and planes, like
Hmm.
volumes that has planes uh, on it, on top of that, like volumes consisting of planes, to
Okay.
be exact. So I usually, what I do, sorry, I like block shapes like that with the clay, like clay buildup, for example,
Hmm.
and then do like the planes, like cut it out like that. So it's like big forms. I don't go with a polish. Like some people like to do it like with their polish brush and just like get planes on the face. like get this plane and like get one here and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, I don't usually do that. So I work in like big uh, big forms
Hmm.
as like clay-like forms, but just as like a structure. And it changes a lot. Like it changes a lot in the end because you can see how like from this it got from here, it got from here to there,
Yeah.
like from here to there. So yeah, so I think of it as blocks with consisting of planes, but not just smooth planes, like something like that. For example, uh, so I separated this, like this model when I started. It's like separations,
Mm.
something like this, and just blocking volumes, just blocking volumes. First of all, I do like the landmarks, like the bony landmarks
Hmm.
for the body and like the rib cage and like the scapulas and stuff like that, and then go from there into like big blocks of shapes.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then like build everything like separate and then combine it in the end in one subtool, like in one tool. Sorry.
Yeah, I've seen this approach come more and more. Does that help you pose it, or what's the reason for doing that?
No, it just simplify the anatomy process because if you like something like this, if you start from a sphere and
Hmm.
then go forward and pull the arms out and it's gonna you know how Dynamesh works.
Hmm.
It's gonna look funky and hard to control. Like something like this, for example. So I usually try to separate the model to torso, arms, legs alone, this part alone, head alone, and then combine them in the end. Not for posing purposes, but just for simplifying the modeling process.
Mm.
Because if you're a beginner and you watch a YouTube video, for example, and you see an experienced artist and he's pulling and from like with the move tool, he's pulling out from a sphere limbs and like head and everything from one sphere. You're gonna be you're gonna find it hard to understand and to because it looks bad in the beginning, like it looks really bad, and
Hmm.
the mesh is not controllable. So I for easier purposes and like for faster purpose, like for faster working purposes, I like to work in like separate tools first and then combine them in the end and not in the end and like midway before going to topology and sculpt on them and just dynamesh them all and then retopo and do the rest of the process. And in industry as well, like in VFX, like in film industry, you will have to do that way. Like you will have to work that way. You'll have to work with the model separated. Like the head is separate than the body, is separate than the arms, than the
Hmm.
legs. Because say you did this stuff and then for some reason the client gave you a feedback, oh no, I need this hand to be like this arm to be a hammer, for example, or like a sword.
Hmm.
So now you're stuck, and if you want to, yes, you can cut it off and just put something else, but it can produce a really high polygon mesh if you work like that and you want to present to the client, for example. So it would be like a really high poly mesh, and you'll find it hard to work with, and you'll find it hard to hand over to other artists. You might want to keep this arm. You don't have to get rid of it. And if you work in separate pieces, you can actually blend the subtools together, so it doesn't look like it's cut off the model.
Hmm.
So I find it for like concepting purposes. I find it to work in like subtools much more convenient than working in one like building an asset from only one sphere, like completely
Totally.
one sphere. Um, it would be much more better if you can simplify the anatomy more to boxes and cylinders and like sphere, like the shoulder muscles to be like a sphere, for example,
Hmm.
and this and the biceps to be like a sphere, and you shape it separately than the other parts. Uh, it will be easier. It will give you faster results, but it takes a lot of time to prepare for it, to put every muscle and like to put every like structure of the body in like geometrical way. You in the end you will see the image more clear, but it's a bit more if you know what you're doing, then go for that. If you don't
Got it.
know what you're doing, so start from sphere and just see where you're going. But basically, but like like in the VFX industry, you will never do that. You will never start from sphere. You will always have a base mesh.
Awesome. I want to talk about another question about anatomy. And if you guys have any questions that are live about anatomy, let me know. But otherwise, after that, I want to jump into texturing if we can.
Yeah, sure.
But what are some of the common mistakes that people make in anatomy that, like, right off the bat, tell you somebody's, still at the beginner stage?
Yeah. So mostly the some of the parts, like the anatomical parts in the body, they can't do right. Like the face, for example, the face is super complicated. It looks simple, but it's not.
Hmm.
Like it's composed of different like so many muscles and groups. So what people tends to do is they tend to hide the structure of the muscles underneath the skin. So for example, they don't know that there is like a muscle like running like this way, for example. So they wouldn't make it like obvious in the wrinkling of the nose. Um, for like the neck muscles, sometimes I see people like do the neck muscles like to here, or like they don't know the insertion points. So it's the insertion points of the muscles, the landmarks. If the landmarks are wrong, so no, you need some work on the anatomy. So it's the bony landmarks, the scapulas, the I don't know the name, the pelvics, the pelvis, so stuff like that.
Hmm.
So if these are missing, so the anatomy is off. Um, like other things, like it gets more obvious in like faces,
Yeah.
in faces, because they usually don't get like these, for example, like these scale, like the scale between the eyes and the nose, like this space, the skull shape, for example. Sometimes it's like they do it as a spherical shape. It's not sphere. It's not sphere.
Mm.
Yeah, it looks like a sphere, but it's an egg shape, and it has some stuff going on. Like it's not a sphere. Like from the front, it might look like a sphere, but it's not actually a sphere.
Got it.
So things like that. Yeah. In anatomy in general, like general body, like yeah, the bony landmarks, the insertion points of the muscles, especially the biceps and the pecs, they get like completely wrong sometimes. Um, yeah, the hands, like the limbs, are super important, and sometimes they don't get it right. Uh,
Yeah, I'm looking at the wrists of this thing that you sculpted, and they're just like, those are just amazing wrists.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, you have to use like reference a lot. Like
Huh?
you have to reference a lot to something, like to an anatomical figure, for example, or like lots of anatomy charts, stuff. So you always need to work from something, especially in the beginning, until you get the memory of and the knowledge of where everything is going.
Hmm.
So yeah, so until this time, like until this happens, you have to work from reference like the whole time. even if you're a professional and you're working like a big, like we always use references at like a MPC or any other company, like always use reference.
Do you have scan data that you work with?
Uh, no, I just
Wow,
use photos from internet.
that's great.
I like to chart like this. Um, yes, just like a chart like this, with
Hmm.
like loads of anatomy references and like muscle groups and
Is that pure ref?
yeah, PureRef. Yeah, it's super helpful because you don't have to save pictures from the internet and search for them and just open one picture at a time. Just drag and drop and you have it floating anywhere.
Okay. All right, hold on. I just spilled a bunch of water on myself. Awesome. Okay, there we go. That should tide me over for now. All right, let's take a look at some texturing because you're a man of many talents. We take a look at your at that sculpt that you did, and if we're on your art station, man, that's like that texture looks amazing. And Susan was mentioning you spend your time in Mari.
Yeah, I spend my time in Mari. I don't know how to use Substance Painter. I know that many people find that funny, but I tried, but I just don't have the time to learn it, and I want to learn it eventually. But I like to stick with Mari because Mari uh, just doesn't give you stuff for free, so you have to work for it.
Did
In
you
other
just
words.
accuse us of cheating with substance?
No, I didn't accuse you. No, 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 no. No,
Teasing.
I told
I'm
you. I told
teasing.
you. I really want to learn it because it cuts like so much time. But for me, for now at least, I like to take the hard road, especially in like personal work. And if you're working in like an industry, in like a film industry, they all use Mari. I don't like at MPC at least. I don't know other studios what they use. MPC, most of them, like in the organic work, they use Mari. So if you want to work in like a big VFX studio as a texture artist, for example, you had to know Mari, no matter what. If you know Substance Painter, yeah, it's great, of course. It's an addition, it's a great addition, but you have to know Mari as well. So yeah, so Mari basically it makes you work for the material and for the look that you're going for. So for example, this texture for the crown and the costumes for the elf. Um, it was done like with a couple of yeah. So some tile maps basically and like merge nodes. Oh, so it's a node graph to be honest. It can look a bit confusing, but it's pretty easy. The node graph is pretty easy. So yeah, so this is just a bunch of tile maps like
Hmm.
this, these maps.
Or does it come with a collection of tiled maps, tileable maps?
No, I just downloaded that from the
Okay.
internet. Yeah, yeah. So I just search for like there's a website called cgtextures.com,
Yeah.
textures.com. Yeah, it got like free textures you can download, so it's pretty helpful and pretty nice resource for artists to get like resources for texturing. So I just got like tiles, like three different materials, and I just mixed with a noise map, uh, like a noise map. I just mixed everything together, and I used an Arnold material in Mari to just get the feel of how it will look like. So yeah, you see, it's like um, noise map with some with a curvature mask, and you have to pay for the extension pack of Mari to get like the curvature and some other uh, procedures that doesn't come with the original Mari package. Um, yeah, so it's just a bunch of tiles mixed together with masks
Hmm.
as noise maps and curvature maps.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it in the end it gives you. I plug it into the AI standard shader
Yeah.
node here in Mari. So yeah, so to get the final look.
Okay, so
Uh,
let me pause you right there. So we're in Mari. For many of my people, this is going to be like totally brand new. There was a question of why Mari over substance in the film, and I think some element of that had to do with UDIMs and just the way that the workflow for film. But do you have any specific way to explain why Mari is more dominant right now?
I think it's more because the UDIM workflow. Because
Okay.
at the moment, yeah, Substance Painter doesn't have like the support for UDIMs, um, and it treats UDIMs as subtools in Substance. But Mari, uh, well, the UV type, the UDIMs in film, a creature like Godzilla, for example, it might contain like a huge number of UV tiles. It's like 30, maybe more, maybe 80,
Hmm.
80 UV tile. So it's like it's crucial to have a software that supports multi UDIMs and multi tiles, and you can paint through easily, and you can mirror your paint and just paint on one side and mirror the other side. Yeah, they will soon support UDIMs, but I'm not sure when. I'm talking about the time being.
Yeah.
It's only Mary. Um, Yeah, so and the majority of people, I think, in the industry, like texture artists, the majority of them they are using Mari. To my knowledge, I don't know. I
And
don't
when
know.
we say supports UDIM, I think we're saying something very specific. It means by support we mean paint across UDIMs, right?
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Okay. How do you explain UDIMs? Do you have an example? I didn't actually um in case
Well,
somebody's not aware of what a UDIM is.
uh, yes, I have an example. Just a second. So I think I have UV tile here. Yeah, so this is UDIMS.
There you go. Wow,
So a creature that big, will have to be painted in a really high resolution maps to be seen in a big screen,
mm-hmm.
like on the big screen, with a really high quality. So
Yeah.
these are actually not so much UDIMs. So typically in the industry, a creature like this will have double the number of UDIMs. So I have like that much more. Uh, because now I have each tile is like 4K.
Okay.
So this is 4K, and this is only this side of the head.
Oh yeah, that's just half the head.
Exactly.
Mm.
So imagine if this is like 4K and this is 4K, so each tile is 4K. So if you need more resolution, you can cut the if you're doing like in the cinema, if there's a shot where this creature will appear like that, for example, this is super close. This is
Really
like
close. Looking at
a,
his mouth.
yeah, exactly. So I think if I'm doing this, I would have to split it up more, or at least take these like the mouth parts here to another UDIM and then like scale them up to fill the 4K UDIM and
Hmm.
cut this more, like cut this face more, like from here, for example, and make this a 4K map. So basically, UDIMs is related to the texture resolution of the model, and again, it's related as well to the output that you want in the end. So if
Hmm.
it's like a super close-up, you make like lots of UDIMs. If it's not a hero character, so you do less UDIMs because it takes so much time to compile and to render.
Hmm. Got it. And this is, well, actually, how do you deal with tiled textures in this case when you're applying them across it? It's just a matter of you apply them and then paint the seams?
No, I paint from scratch.
Yeah.
So I just open here. It will take a while to open, sorry, but I'll talk until it opens.
Okay.
You just paint on the model, like directly on the model. This is going to be a bit scary, the node graph, but just don't mind it. It's pretty easy if you break it down. So basically what you do is when you paint on like stuff like that, what I usually do is I poly model, like poly paint, sorry, in ZBrush. So I have like a base color and then export that to Murray. So I have like a base texture to work with, and then paint directly on the model. So it's like directly a paint like that on the model. So you paint across the seams anyways. If I need something specific and like to project something, say here on the face or something, I will like project here, but away from the seams. I will not touch the seams. If it happens and the color, for example, go through the seam, it will make a seam in the model, in the texture. So you have to go on top of it and just run through it and paint over it and to hide it basically. Yeah, but basically what I will do, I will poly paint in ZBrush because it's much easier, much faster, and then take it to just to get like a base color and send it to Mari to start working with like procedurals, projections. If I need to get like some projections from animals or stuff like that. And yeah, you just go on the model and just hide like paint over the seams,
Okay,
like
got it.
directly, yeah, directly on top of it.
All right, so it is a matter of you're still applying tileable texture after texture and layering those to establish a base,
Yeah,
and
yep,
then just hiding the seam.
yep. Like something like this. Um, so yeah, so something like this. If I show the orthographic view, so I usually do I get the base color from ZBrush and I plug it here and then put some tileables, noises, procedural noises. So this is not the correct. Yeah, yeah. So this is the shade and the texture network. It's a bit big, but yeah. So it's a bit scary. So yeah.
Love it. I love it. And you're like, it's super easy, but I just want everybody to know rocket
Yeah.
science is very
If
easy
you
to rocket scientists. Let's just be okay.
no, it's not. It's not. If you break it, like if you break through it, it's all layers. Like these are all like paint layers.
Yeah.
I just separate, like I paint something and I don't want to mess it up, so I just merge over another paint layer and just paint on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then go through, and this is like a radio node, and the radio node go to another radio node here, which is another. Yeah, it's a lot of layers because there's a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it can be a bit intimidating in the beginning, but when you know it and when you break it down, like when you break it up, when you work on it, basically, like I mean, if you look at it now, you're gonna be like, oh my God, this is so much. But if you are the one doing it and going like step by step, adding a node after node, you'll find it's nothing. It's just a bunch of procedural maps and like masks and colors on top of each other to come up with the final look. And here I have like I separated the blood from the body. It's like in another layer with another like specular map. And
Beautiful.
So yeah, so it looks like a workflow from Substance design Substance Painter, but
Hmm.
it's a bit more manual. You don't just like put a smart material on or something like that. It's a bit more manual. It takes more time. Yes, it's time consuming. Yes, but it's worth it in the end if you want to get yourself trained on harder situations.
Yeah.
Because sometimes at like studios, you might be surprised, like, oh, we don't have license for Substance Painter, for example. We only have Mary, and the texture artist that we want him to know Mary. So if you don't know Mary, so you're missing out.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can actually lose a job because you don't know the software.
Now you're at MPC. They're I forget what they call those companies, but they're not the maker of the movie. They're basically a studio, not a studio. They're oh, I can't believe I forgot the term. But this is a
Production.
job you've had for quite a while.
Yeah,
Usually film is less stable. That's where I was ultimately going with this. Film is not necessarily the most stable, game is more stable. But companies
yeah,
like NPC, you know, like for example, one of my friends, Niles has been there a long time.
yeah. At APC.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know him. I know. Yeah, he's actually my friend.
Yeah, he's I tell students about Niles all the time because he's the one who taught me that you only need one model.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was one model. He was telling the story about how it was one model that got him a job. And they at MPC they looked at one model and it was a model he did in one of our classes. And they were like, well, that's it. You're you're hired. They didn't look at a damn thing. And he worked 6 months
Yeah.
plus on that, 40 hours a week. And nervous breakdown after nervous breakdown, he said. Oh my, nervous breakdown looking at that nodal setup.
Well, this is the elf setup for the face, but
Damn.
no, this is I didn't work with the nodes here. I used the layer base, the layer base, so that's why
Mhm.
the nodes are a bit messy. I didn't work on the nodes. So when you use basically in Mari, when you use the layer base workflow, the nodes are super hectic like that. It's like you will never know which is which and where to go. So if you have to decide before going in, before working, like starting to work, if you are working with a node system
Hmm.
or the layer base system. So this is so much like Photoshop, to be honest. I like to use it with characters, like realistic characters, not creatures, because it's much more manageable. Uh, Creatures I like nodes because it gives you more freedom to put
Hmm.
like much anything you want. But this one I like it more in cactus. It's more straightforward and you know where to go and you know what to do. So for the elf, I basically what I did for the texturing, I had like a base color. Just let me show the channel only. So I have the channels here. So the channels here is what you. So I have the base color, which is the epidermal color of the skin or the
Yeah.
pale skin on top. So this
Uh-huh.
is the diffuse basically in Maya and the standard surface and the Arnold standard surface. So this is the diffuse. You have no. I tried to remove all the veins information from it and the uh, blood-like colors from
Hmm.
the. So it's pretty pale and a bit bluish, desaturated. And I have, of course, the displacement map is like painted, like so. This is the displacement map, the multi-channel from XYZ, texturing XYZ.
And you're pulling in all the channels, right? The red, green, and blue.
Yeah, yeah. And you
Okay.
can here, you go to the layers. Sorry, you go to the layers and you say copy channel, for example, and then when you export, you say, oh, I want the red channel. So this is the
Hmm.
secondary maps, and this is the tertiary maps, and this is the micro details. So you can actually control it. And you can control each one separately here with like levels and stuff like
Yeah,
that if you
that's
need.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I have the specular, the micro specular, which is the broad specular of the face. So it's basically the displacement specular. It's like super broad. It gives uh, it gives variation in spec light on the model.
Mm.
Not too hard, just to give like specular that the skin have, like the base specular to be exact. And I have the oil specular, which is the tight areas, just the more oily areas like the mouth, the eyes,
Yeah.
nose, cheeks. And then I have the SSS color, which is it is basically a copy from the diffuse color, from the base color, but it's more saturated, has more colors. I painted some veins here, like these are manually painted
Hmm.
with procedural noise and just masked some areas. So I painted like this, all that stuff. And there was like a tattoo here, but it's not in this version. And then this is the most important map of all. I mean, for Arnold at least, the Sss Radius. So this controls the scattering. This
Hmm.
controls the scattering of the skin.
Hmm.
So basically, darker reds means less scattering. Brighter reds or brighter values means more scattering. So and the colors differs because this is a scattering of the veins, for example. Uh, Here is gray, like I painted gray here because these are like thin areas, tends to glow and glow red in the render. So when you paint it like mid-level gray, it is still scattering, but it's not glowing red. So you don't have the red glow in thin areas that most renders has, like for realistic faces. So
Hmm.
especially in the nose, like this is uh, pretty thin, and this is pretty thin. So just to avoid the glowing of the red color from the shader.
Now you're using texture.xyz, right? Texture and
Yep,
XYZ.
yep.
Okay, so I saw the multi-channel. I see that. How are you building this channel?
Well, it's in Photoshop. Sorry. The multi-channel XYZ map, it already comes packed with the like it's all on top of each other.
Hmm.
So you don't build it basically. You actually take it as is.
Okay.
Yeah. But the thing is, you wrap it around the model with wrap 3. Like I use wrap 3
Hmm.
to wrap. I'll show you now what I mean. So yeah, I'm pretty sure most people know the this way. But it's just you get a plane and you project the texture on the plane in Maya, just the UV, and I wrap it around the model with the texturing XYZ color applied on it, and then I bake the color with X normals. I bake the color, the displacement information, everything, and then go to Mari and start filling in the gaps. Yeah, and start filling in the gaps. I'll show you this. It will look a bit. So yeah, this one, this one will look creepy for now, but it's still work in progress. But it will show the incomplete, like the early stage of the process. Yeah, and
That's cool.
sometimes if you get like pictures like this, for
Hmm.
example,
Yeah.
I tend to unfold them like that in Photoshop just to have the consistent lighting. If the pictures doesn't have like the same lighting like that, I can color tone it and color grading and fix the differences of the angles because this angle would be different than this angle, like lighting wise.
Right.
So the skin tone will be different. So I usually unfold it like that here in Photoshop and just fix it and send it go back to Mary and just start working with it. So yeah, so this is it, and this is the Maya. So yeah, this opened. If you're using the old XYZ maps that comes with the primary and the secondary and tertiary and the micro details maps, you'll have to combine them in Photoshop. You just open the first map, the secondary map, and just put the tertiary and the micro, one in the green channel and one in the red channel, the blue channel and the green channel. The
Cool.
tertiary in the green and the micro in the blue channel. So yeah, so that's how it comes from texturing XYZ. You get it
That's
like that.
that. This is going to be. This is a whole class. This has to be a class. This is really good. All right. Well, we're right there at about an hour. So
Okay.
let me open this up for everybody. If you got some questions, give me a quick shout out. I think the last thing we should probably do is just unpack this guy that you've got because you've got this elf in Maya. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you did to finish it, to get the skin and all that. We've talked about the sculpting. We've talked
Yeah,
about
sure.
texturing inside of Mari.
Yeah.
And then now we probably ought to just like how you bring that stuff in. But let me open this up, guys. If you've got questions, make sure you're shouting those things out right now, so I can start threading those in. Okay. All right. So you've got your sculpt, you've got your texture, you've done your texture.xyz. What do you do
Yeah.
then?
Then I do grooming work. So I take it to Maya and do the grooming work with the XGen. Sorry, this is
Yeah.
too much things. So yeah, so I use like XGen to do like the grooming work. So I didn't care much about the back because it wasn't going to be obvious. And always don't overwork. If something is not going to appear, just forget about it. Don't lose time doing that, and you don't need it. If you need to show the model from all angles, then yeah. But if you just aiming for an emotion portrait or an expression portrait, just a portrait, you're not moving it, then just don't lose time and waste time doing other stuff that is not going to appear. So yeah, so for this one, I use XGen to groom the hair. So it's pretty basic here. And then after that, set up the lights. So I set up the lighting without the texture first, just to get the general first impression and
Hmm.
general first feel of how it would look like, and then try to adjust the light later with the shader on, because the shader makes the light look totally different. If you're testing the lights from ZBrush with multiple mediums. Okay, yeah, sure. Should I answer that question first?
We can take that later.
Okay. So yeah, if you're lighting with like a clay model with no shader on it,
Hmm.
just like a Lambert or something, you tend to get correct representation, wrong representations or representation of the light.
Hmm.
Uh, it might look brighter, but it's not bright. When you apply the subsurface scattering and you apply all the textures and everything,
Right.
it doesn't look bright in the end. It looks super dark and you don't
Right.
know what to do, and oh, it's not dramatic enough. It's so you feel lost. So first, do the lighting with the Lambert shader on. Try to don't make it like overexposed and stuff like that. And then after that, when you apply the shader, readjust the light accordingly. It doesn't have to be physically correct. If it looks good enough in the end, then it's physically correct. So it doesn't matter to
Do
be
you
like,
rebuild the Arnold network, or does it export from Mari? Like, what's the network inside of Maya?
yeah, uh, yeah, I'll show you. I rebuild it from the beginning.
Hmm.
But there's a little handy tool from XYZ to set up the displacements.
They're crafty people,
The
those guys.
displacement map. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty fun to use, to be honest. So yeah, so this is the shading network for the model. It looks a bit intimidating, but it's all color correct nodes, nothing else. I mean, this is the
Mm,
specular node.
we do that
That's
in Unreal.
yeah, the tight specular node, the main specular node with a remap HSV and like a luminance
Yep.
to convert from color to I don't know, I forgot the name of this value, but it's the scalar to a scalar value.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and this is the radius map. I connected to a remap node and apply it to the subsurface radius. So let's go from here first. So the weight, this is the weight that I used, 0.4,
Hmm.
and the subsurface I used 0.6. So together they are one.
Got it.
Um, and the scale is one, of course, because the model is real world scale. And
Hmm.
always with the subsurface, try to work with the real world scales and the mesh to be water level mesh. It means it has no holes in it. So the geometry is closed. Right, still there?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, so the mesh is completely closed, no open areas in the polygons in the mesh,
Okay.
just to get correct subsurface scattering. Um, so yeah, so the weight and the base they add to one in the end, because if you make it only subsurface to one, it will look waxy, and if you put the too much weight, it will look too plastic like or like wood like, be
Hmm.
super dry. So I think this is a good balance, and don't take this as a rule. Every character differs. Every character has its own situation, so don't just take this as like, oh, if it didn't work for me, then it's bad. No, I mean every character you have to try and try and try and try. Like I had this result after like a week of trial and error.
Mm. That's good. That's great to hear. Thank you for that. All
Yes, you
right.
never. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is basically the shade index, so diffuse color, and always with a remap just to adjust the values and the hue saturation and the value of the map on the fly on the render because it's different. Like ZBrush, you see stuff in Murray and you think it's great, and you see stuff in Substance Painter and you think it's amazing, and when you take it to Arnold, you start rendering, and oops, it doesn't look like what it's looked like in Murray or in the texturing software. So you have
Yeah.
to put like a remap node after every map to get the tweaks on the go while you're
Mhm.
rendering.
And it looks, I mean, that map or that ramp that you have on this, where you've got under your value, that's not a normal, like just a linear ramp. You've got some
Yeah, I
stuff
get
going on
some.
there.
Yeah, because here what I did in the radius map, I needed some areas to be lighter and some areas to be darker in
Mm.
the values of reds, for example. So
Hmm.
what I did, I had the IPR render to the side rendering with the isolate. I isolated this map with the isolate option in the new Arnold.
Yeah.
I basically isolated this map and just tweaked the curves where and saw the effect like real time.
Ah, nice. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
I understand. So that's how that got crafted. I really appreciate you taking the time and
thanks.
walking us through this, man. And I mean, this is great. And I'd love to like have another conversation with you and get your eyes on some students' work,
Yeah, sure.
if you have time, because uh, there's something that really draws me to this conversation with you is, you know, you're everything you're doing here, you've gone deep. Like you could
Uh,
take this
I'm
conversation
still
further.
I'm still learning, to be honest. I mean, this is the first realistic portrait I ever make, like I ever looked at or like do a shader network for it or stuff.
Hmm.
So this is like pretty much rendering wise and like shading wise, it's pretty new for me. I don't say that I'm like a pro in like look dev. I'm still like learning so much. Um, so. So yeah, it would be great to talk to you again. Of
So
course.
why don't we end with this question because I don't talk about VFX enough because I'm focused on like a lot of what I focus on is games, and it has everything to do with it's just like it's a slightly more stable job than
Yeah,
VFX. But the cool part of that is that VFX sometimes because of the instability, there's a little bit more ins occasionally.
yeah.
So let's end with what Gus is asking. Gus is asking for beginners who'd like to enter VFX, which areas do you recommend they focus on? And by that I mean like, like for example, 10 years ago, if you knew ZBrush, you had a job. If you know ZBrush today, well, welcome
Welcome
to
to
the
the
rest of
web.
the crew,
Yeah.
yeah. you know. So what do you think people focus on now that's going to both be cool and help them get a job?
Um, Software wise, I don't think there is any. I mean, if you know that it's a tool in the end.
Hmm.
I mean, just do some personal work. If you're a student, if you're not a professional and you don't have like a professional tutorial, for example, then you'll have to work a bit, like do some effort and just do some pieces. It doesn't have to be wow pieces, but it just had to be acceptably correct. Like it has to be pleasant. It
Hmm.
has to look nice. Anatomically, the anatomy should look correct because if the anatomy looks bad, you're not getting the job. I'm sorry. If it's like look dramatically bad,
Hmm.
you will not get it. I'm not saying that all the people in like the VFX industry get the anatomy right. No, we all have our mistakes, and we all have our like our things, but um, it has to look acceptable. Uh, yeah, just see what the market wants at the moment. Some people like find lots of job for doing like creature modeling, for example. So if you like animals, just sculpt some animals. Doesn't have to be many. Just do one good animal, and
Yeah.
you will land the job. Like I can guarantee that. Like do one good animal sculpt, correct anatomy, uh, and it looks good, you will get it. Yeah, you will get something. So just concentrate on something that looks good in the end, and just don't publish anything that doesn't look like um, acceptable, at least.
Awesome. I like that. I like how you're only publishing the stuff that you want. And I think there is a rush to publish these days.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't usually do like personal work a lot because I'm like, when I was at Egypt, I was like super busy and I used to go to work from like 10 a.m. until like 2 a.m. next day. So
Hmm.
I didn't have any time to do any personal work. And here at MPC, I have sometimes, not always. And I like to enjoy more, to be honest. Like I like to like go out and stuff like that because I already spent like time working. But in the end, I can do some stuff that I can show to people
Hmm.
when you need something. But in the end as well, I work in an industry that I will have a showreel in the end. But if you're a beginner, you don't have a film showreel. You're not experienced in the film industry, so you need to get in. So to get in, do some personal work because you
Yeah.
have nothing else to do. And it doesn't have to be like the whole day. A couple hours a day is enough.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, James is asking, when you started working at MPC, did you have to move or were you able to do remote?
No, I had to move. Not all companies do remote work,
Yeah,
especially big VFX companies because it's super um,
privacy.
confidential. Yeah,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
got to keep that stuff locked down. All right, my friend Hisham, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
the time.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really pleased to meet you all guys and to meet you especially. I mean, I learned from you a lot.
Ah, that's awesome. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. And that obviously I put some good out in the universe because looking at this, I mean, your work is great. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
All right, take care. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right, see y'all.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com, where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch. But at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right? Thank you so much again for being here. Take care. Have an amazing day.